so not too far from where I'm. And I said, you know what? I saw that they were doing this tour stop, so I want to go over there and check everything out. So I signed up to do pretty much everything on the experience that they offered. Now, keep in mind, with most of the vehicles here, they're all pre-production prototype versions. So like, for example, this one actually is the production version. So this is the class 3 commercial truck, and I got to drive that, which was really cool. And I also got to drive the class 1 version, which is their a smaller fleet vehicle. I actually had the opportunity to drive that before, when that company was Electric Last Mile Solutions, and then Mullen acquired them in bankruptcy. So this class 3 is also from that acquisition. So they had a little bit of a head start because some of those supply chain elements were already kind of underway when they had acquired them. The class 1, technically, yeah, see that little one in the left corner? So we could take it on this little track. It's hard to kind of see because you couldn't get up and over the barriers here. But that whole area, that pit, is full of cones where we were going through like slalom and a bunch of different exercises to take the vehicle through, and parking and stuff. But that little class 1, I was able to drive that as well. The other consumer cars, the GT, which is their like coupe style performance vehicle, and then the Mullen 5, which is the SUV, I was a passenger in both of those. Very fun experience. I will say the commercial 3, the one that is in production right now, seemed to me to be pretty fully baked, and felt really great. No issues as far as it was smooth acceleration. I can see, it is somewhat limited range and things like that, but for the application that it's supposed to serve, I think they'll sell enough to get that ramped up. And eventually, the whole point here is for them to sell the fleet vehicles and get that production up, and then be able to fund the consumer products. And I actually had the opportunity to talk to the VP of marketing as well. And so he provided some insights there, but I'm gonna have a whole video that comes up about the whole experience. I was really actually shocked as to the operations size, because I consider Mullen being like kind of a smaller player, obviously, and technically now they only have one thing in production. They have a lot going on, but they had like 3 semi trucks. They had several different like parts of the experience, a small merchandise area that was a really nice like air conditioning unit for being outside at a track experience. They had the Bollinger B2, because Mullen has also acquired a portion of Bollinger to get their commercial operation up and running, and so then they can finally fund the B1 and B2. And Robert Bollinger was at the event, which was really cool to see him. I interviewed him a few years back. He was actually one of my first videos I ever produced on my channel, was sitting down at an interview at their headquarters in Michigan here. And so it was good to see him and catch up with him. And he's like, you got to come by and test out the big truck. And I know Seth, I think, had an experience going to M City and driving around in it. But he's like, I got a lot of updates to give you. So we'll make a time to sit down with him and get a video up on that too. They also had basically like on the on-track experience, it was, I would say with the consumer products, you could definitely tell they're still in that prototype phase. Like the fit and finish is not there. The quality of the components that they have in there, you can tell it's a show car, it's just a piece. But as far as those powertrains go, like they felt pretty good. But they're a long way from going into production on that side of things. It's really what they're focusing on is that launching the commercial division so that they can fund the rest of the operation. But it was great. It was, I was very surprised. I did not think that it would be the operation that it was that I saw. So I was really impressed.
I'm really surprised by the idea of sort of, and I understand there's a substantial element of this is that they've kind of like swept up quite a lot of other companies and stuff. But the whole kind of trying to nail the commercial, which I think there's a big market for, and there's clearly like people have tried and failed in that space, and if they're actually producing viable products, then they've got a huge opportunity there. But then trying to sort of like semi at the same time, but as a later stage, introduce the consumer stuff. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It just feels in, like there's really
feels-
large OEMs that can't manage to juggle this at the moment. Like,
Yep.
So
Well,
I
there's
guess
a lot-
I'd just be concerned.
Well, definitely, if you look at like how the stock has performed, it's been like a wild journey for a lot of the stock holders. So I know that there's been a lot of turmoil as far as that goes, and I don't know too much about that front, and I didn't really get too much insight from the VP of marketing on all of that, but he did give me plans about how they're laying it all out and what they hope to achieve. If they'll actually be able to achieve it, it's hard to say, but I just was really, because usually at this stage of the game, when you have an event like this, usually it's like a couple tents and maybe a few cars and a couple bodies, and then that's pretty much it. But I mean, it was like full blown, all these big cubes and stuff like that, holding cars and just the elements, the assets. And I've worked in the experiential marketing business. Actually, used to do that type of work that those people were doing at that event for a very long time. So I know what goes into it. And so I was really just surprised how much of that was, it looked really, really good. So somewhat promising. But again, it is, one of those companies that's still getting their feet off the ground. So you got to kind of take it with a little bit of a grain of salt.
But the product you sampled shows promise, which is a good, because I guess you find a lot of companies like that that go, oh, we're going to do 1 million miles and we're going to do this, and here's our wonky. You can't touch the car, though. If you touch the car, it might vanish into dust.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like when you're in the prototype or show car phase, it's really easy to make one of those. It's really hard to get to manufacturing and production. So the stuff might look okay right now, but it's a whole nother ball of wax when you get into manufacturing. So I don't know. To me, it's like, yes, it was a fun experience and they handled well enough for what they were trying to ask for. Like in the GT, we went on the track and we got up to about like 170 miles per hour. Now you could tell he was, my driver, braking much earlier than I expected him to brake, considering the performance of the car. And he's like, oh, they're Brembos and stuff like that. But still, like, you can just tell that, like, yes, this is still in the pre-production phase. So, the VP of marketing said it's going to be a couple of years until we can get the consumer line. So part of the acquisition of Electric Last Mile Solution was getting the old Hummer factory in Mishawaka, Indiana. And so that's where they said that they're going to be building those consumer production vehicles, including the Bollinger models. But commercial has to come first because it needs to be able to fund the rest of the stuff. So as long as the commercial stuff continues to, churn out, and they're going to come out with the class 1 production version. That one I was not confident in, even though I drove that, like I mentioned, when it was Elms. The one that I drove back in the day when it was still Elms was more baked than what I experienced on this program, because there was a lot of motor like cogging. Like it was not smooth, but they did add some elements like a rear backup camera and stuff, which was nice to see. But ultimately, like, they still have a little ways to go tweaking that. But it's basically just a bunch of supplier components that they're piecing together, as far as I understand. So they're just final assembly is what I'm getting from a lot of other suppliers.
Gotcha. Right. Well, Mullen sounds promising. Fingers crossed. I've been playing in something as well